All right, folks, welcome to the 5th annual Sportswatch Year interview with DC Rainmaker.
And Mr. DesFit here.
How's it going, everyone?
We're back. We're ready to do this again.
Number 5. I can't believe this is actually, number 5 already.
Do we have more watches this year or less watches this year?
Okay, so I did not count them. So we have 5, 10. No, actually, we have a few more. So 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, because we got a couple that aren't on the table.
And 25-ish probably we can talk about.
Yep.
So this is basically a wrap-up of all the major sports watch releases and smartwatches, actually, of 2023. So this isn't going to necessarily be an in-depth review of each of these watches. However, between both our YouTube channels and Race website, we have full in-depth reviews of all of these watches. I think we've both reviewed pretty much all of them. A little overlap here and there, or lots of overlap, pardon me. But just a few here and there that he's reviewed and that I haven't, and then vice versa. But this is going to just be more of an overview of each release, talking about the new features, what we liked about them, what we didn't like about them.
Maybe also what's worked longer term, like over the course of the year, what some of those trends are, as well as some of the things that maybe didn't pan out from those watches or vice versa by the time we get to now.
Absolutely, yeah. And so this is going to be a long video, but this is the kind of video that you can actually just kind of put in the background and just listen to it podcast style. So this isn't necessarily something yet you have to watch the entire thing, but listening to the entire thing is going to be probably beneficial. I guess in terms of that, though, what was this year's trends that you think?
All AMOLED.
It was AMOLED all the time. And it's so funny, like at the end of our video last year, that's exactly what, we
figured AMOLED would be the strong contender this year. I think we saw that even from brands that we weren't necessarily sure about. And I think there's really only 2 brands left on the table right now that don't have an AMOLED variant. And I think, the writing's on the wall. Like there's no, and we'll talk about that later on and why the shift can finally now happen. And some of the interesting tidbits I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize about AMOLED versus mid displays and how fast that technology is moving. And even what we've seen some really interesting variation between AMOLED watches released at the beginning of the year and I would argue the very last AMOLED watch and some of the unique features that it has on it that none of these other guys have. That makes it really interesting.
I think another trend this year too were big software releases from quite a few companies. That would be Apple, Garmin, COROS, across the board.
Suunto, the big one just asked a couple days.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. This is kind of where we will talk about quite a few watches this year that were very much S-tier type upgrades, or just spec bumps, to be honest with you, because a lot of new features came via software, which is honestly great for everyone because at that point, people don't necessarily have to spend more money to get the new features.
It's the way to go.
Yep, absolutely. So speaking of new software features, so this isn't a new watch as of 2023, but it was last year, 2022. However, it got a big new feature.
Yeah, and we should mention that we're doing this in order of when they came out.
Yes.
So this is January, and that is now in December. And so it's going to go this way from start to finish. So this over here is the Venu 2 Plus. And you may be saying, hey, this came out like before. But I would argue, and I think we both, probably why we're including it here, is it got such a major feature in the realm of not just smartwatches, but sort of the arc of where this company is going, that it's worthwhile mentioning briefly, at least, before we go on the others.
Yeah, so basically with the Venu 2 Plus, what it basically got was an ECG feature. So a medically certified ECG feature for the US. And this was something that the hardware was built into the watch, basically with like the little isolation ring around the heart rate sensor, as well as the metal bezel around here. So basically you would just wear this on your wrist, sit really still, hold right here, and then it would do a medically certified ECG.
Yep. And that was the first time we saw Garmin release that. And it's something that we knew was coming for a long time. I think we even talked about it last year in the video because there have been, as part of the approval process for ECG, and this is true across different watches, and this is something that we'll talk about, I think, even down later on in the polar realm as well. For that feature, you're doing studies, you're doing validations, you're publishing that to regulatory bodies' websites. And so we knew that was coming. And there are some companies that will actually do that secretively under fake names. So Apple is famous for that, where they did all of their ECG testing under fake company names. You can actually go look up these fake companies when they finally release it all. There's little bits of trails that pull that through that you're like, that's actually Apple. And those are discarded companies at the end of the day. It's really fascinating. But Garmin didn't. Garmin just did it under Garmin's entity brand name. So therefore you could find it really easily and see that progress. But you don't ever really know when it's going to pop out. And again, something we'll talk about later on with the polar side of it.
What's great about this feature is that when you bought the Venu 2 Plus, or if you did, it was just something that you just got it as a bonus, like a year down the road. And it really shows that Garmin is really, they're putting a lot more focus onto the health side of things, as well as the fitness side, which they've been known for forever. So this is definitely expanding or helping them expand their kind of reach, I guess you could say.
Absolutely.
So
Cool.
Yep. So next up, we have another Garmin. So this is the Garmin vivomove Trend. So this is a hybrid smartwatch. This was kind of the update to the vivomove Sport.
Effectively, yeah. It sat in an interesting spot there because it's trying to combine different product lines. Another thing we'll probably talk about at some point is all of Garmin's different product lines and how those are all supposed to fit together. There's also the vivomove Classic editions, right, as well. And there's a bunch of different editions depending on whether it was fancier or more sporty. And this sort of aimed to kind of combine some of those.
Yeah, I think it's probably, it's really their most classic looking hybrid smartwatch, I guess you could say. This kind of continued along the trend of the Instinct crossover that we saw last year. So just seeing another hybrid smartwatch come out. So this one right here, in addition to being a little bit more premium and kind of sitting in the middle like you were talking about, it also added a full LCD display versus the previous version, or the lower end version having just the lower LCD or OLED, I think, down here. And then there's just a lot more information on the screen that can be shown at this point. So it just looks a lot better.
And what's cool is when you flip it over, you'll see it's got the same optical sensor. Garmin's a couple different elevate optical heart rate sensors in them. But what Garmin's going for here, and the same thing that, Withings really pioneered this category, I don't know, half a decade ago or so, is to have these classical watches, but have all the features of their smartwatch, or at least most of the features of a smartwatch at the lower end of their spectrum. So like all the steps, all the sleep stuff, all that stuff it's the same as whether you buy it for a Fenix watch at $1,000 for their high-end Fenix or this. That core set of features is identical across both of them. Now, of course, there are differences when it comes to like sport modes and training readiness and stuff like that. But all the core stuff is there.
Yeah, I think this is just going to be a great watch for someone who wants a watch that doesn't look like a smartwatch, that can still track plenty of health features and do a lot of have a lot of fitness capabilities as well. It doesn't have built-in GPS, so that's just kind of something that if you want to go do an outdoor activity, just bring your phone with you. Honestly, even for me, I bring my phone with me pretty much on all my activities, so it wouldn't be that big a deal. But other than that, yeah, it's just again, it's just kind of for someone who wants a watch without looking like one of the others, I guess you could say here. Yeah. All right. Next up, we have a double release, but we'll start out with the first one is the Forerunner 265. So last year, Garmin brought out the Forerunner 255 and the 955. And those were pretty big releases just because the 255 got full triathlon support. The 955 brought out new features like training readiness. And basically, these are the AMOLED counterparts to those watches. However, they added a few other features at the same time, which at this point, most of those features have already gone back to the 255 and the 955 via software update as well. The
singular exception being the training readiness on the 265 was the one that didn't get added back to the 255.
Reasons unknown.
Reasons unknown. And that's it. To me, that's probably the weirdest one out of almost everything we're going to talk about today, is that this feature, one of the things that I often struggle with when it comes to Garmin's pricing schemes is that, in my mind, for each pricing tier, you should have a set baseline of features, right? And to be clear, I have no problem that a $1,000 watch has more features than a $500 watch, and a $500 watch has more features than a $250 watch, right? Features are not free. It's not free to add features from one watch to the next. So it has to be tested and validated and all the things that software has done for years. In my mind, though, when you have two watches at the same pricing tier, though, those should have relatively equal features. And we see that in particular with Garmin's Instinct 2 series and the 255. And that if you bought an Instinct 2, even just over the last couple weeks on sale for $199, right? Like you were paying almost twice as much for the Forerunner 255 music as you would be paying for the Instinct, and you wouldn't get training readiness, but you would on the Instinct. And in my mind, like there should be a baseline feature set, and then as you move up, you get more features with higher prices. And the 265 is great because it does include the training readiness, but the fact that 255 didn't get it,
that one's a struggle right there. Yeah, it really should have got it. I mean, the 255 and the 265, they really are, sister and brother, I guess you could say, in terms of like MIP versus AMOLED displays, basically the transflective versus the kind of, super vibrant displays. And other than that, feature set really should have been the same.
Should have been the same. But that's it. The 265 is a very solid watch. It's the one that I would say is my go-to recommendation watch for someone that doesn't want to spend a lot of money, still wants a prettier looking display, still wants something that feels like a smarter watch, has all the features that they're going to likely need. That's like the go-to. Like for friends and family that aren't going to spend, don't want to spend, and justifiably so, a ton of money on a Fenix level type thing, this is like the sweet spot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, really in terms of features, if you want to just track your sports, this is it. I mean, this is a great watch. I mean, you don't, going up in price, you'll get maps, you'll get more premium material, stuff like that. But, the fact that this has full triathlon support, open water swimming,
Power meter support.
I mean, it is a fully functional watch. Yep. So, and now that it has AMOLED, AMOLED's here to stay.
Here to stay, yeah. I think the 255 going over to AMOLED along with the 965 we'll talk about in a second here, that is the transition for the Forerunner series. And obviously I can't predict exactly what Garmin's going to do in the future, but I would be incredibly surprised if we see another MIP-based Forerunner ever, probably.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see one. I think talking about another watch that's coming down later on down the road, kind of, again, showing the trends of moving away from MIP.
Yeah, I mean, especially as battery life is catching up, it's no longer a concern, and display visibility is no longer a concern, as we'll talk about later on, and things like that. Like those are areas where over time that technology it's moving so much faster than it was. I mean, if you look 2 or 3 years ago, there are watches that were made with AMOLED displays that were totally unreadable outside. I mean, some of the Fitbit ones in particular come to mind that had that you just couldn't see anything outside on like some of the original Charge
4 is probably.
Yeah, would be a good example. But now it's just, they're so much better, and it's getting there. I think, one of the challenges with AMOLED people always talk about is it bright enough for bright sunny conditions, and is it too bright in dark conditions? And we saw, for example, with Apple, we'll talk about later on, going down to 1 nit, right, in brightness at nighttime. And, some of that's like marketing stuff to get you pulled into things, but there's also a reality to not blinding yourself or others in the room at 3 a.m, right? And so, and I think we're seeing all the companies do that. Like we see with, you not to like skip too far ahead here, but when we look at what Garmin does at night and what Apple does at night and what Samsung does at night and Fitbit does at night, and turning these way down from a display brightness level, that's something that we see Suunto and Polar starting to go down those trails, but there's still a little bit of like, you can blind yourself in the middle of the night with a Suunto Race. And they just haven't had the time maturity yet to add those little features in that they'll get there. Like there's no question it probably happened in the next couple of software updates or something, but those are all little things that have to happen over time.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Yep. All right. So that's the Forerunner 265. Now we have the kind of bigger sibling, the Forerunner 965. And this one, again, is just basically the AMOLED counterpart to the 955. However, they actually went with their biggest AMOLED display yet. So this is 1.4 inches. Just absolutely tons of pixels to deal with here. So this is the same size display that's going to be found on their largest 51 millimeter Epix Pro watch right here. So just a gigantic display. Maps look absolutely gorgeous on it. With the 965, they did increase its case size just slightly as well because of that larger display. And they also have a titanium bezel around here.
Yeah, they really checked off boxes when people looked at the 955 a year prior. Some of the criticisms were around the plastic bezel and things like that. And for some people, like myself, the plastic bezel doesn't bother me in any way, shape, or form. But other people, it did. And that was one, I think, the criticism that a lot of people said is that, on the COROS Vertex that came out in that time frame, a year and a half prior or so, had a nicer bezel than the 955, and they were at roughly similar price points and things like that. And so this is where I think Garmin was checking off some of those boxes of going, okay, fine, we can add a metal-like bezel around it to make it look prettier. Also note, as you just mentioned, that the display is the same as the Epix Pro, right? In terms of that middle size. And that's one of the things that when you look at how Garmin can pull this off, and we're on a Garmin streak because that's just the way the calendar has worked thus far, but it's going to change in a second here. They reuse the different components, different watches, right? So not only does this particular watch body get reused as a golf watch and as a different type of watch in their other lineups, just with, different color case and whatnot and slightly tweaked, but otherwise the exact same internals. But the displays get reused across different watch lineups as well. So like display gets used in the Epix series, then it goes off and gets used in the Tactix series, then it goes off and used in a marine watch, and it's just, their scale there is insane how they can do that all within their own manufacturing facility.
I think one thing I really liked about this watch, because of that titanium bezel, is that it really did bring that premium touch to it. So, for people who are okay with plastic bezels, that's cool in the gang. But I think this was popular because it did bring a more premium option to the Forerunner lineup, kind of like was seen on the not old school, but the throwback Forerunner 645.
Oh, that's a long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, but that was a great looking premium-ish watch sort of thing. So definitely a comment that I heard out there. And to be honest with you, I think this would have been a cool option is a sapphire lens on this watch. You did a Forerunner 965 versus Epix Gen 2 video, which was a rabbit hole of all rabbit holes.
Bane in my existence.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, when this came out, I kind of called it a little Epix Junior because in my mind, it very much is, because it has nearly every feature with some extremely fine detail little caveats here and there. But realistically, they're very similar watches.
And they're getting closer and closer, right? It's something that Garmin understands as well. And that video, I did not intend when I made that video to go down the rabbit hole as deep as I did. I intended it to be like, I think the end of the video was like 65 differences between the two or something like that. And I assumed there would be like 15-ish or so. And they'd be, big ticket items that were obvious, right? But the further you went down the rabbit hole, you realize there's all these silly little nuanced things that were different. And, when I made that video, somebody at Garmin kind of responded back with, actually two different people responded back on two different teams, basically saying, this is a problem. We recognize there should not be those gaps between those product lineups that nuanced, right? Like some gaps, if they have feature differentiation because they're, again, different areas. Like the Fenix and Tactix team will talk about how their watches also carry or cater to golfers, for example. And so they have more golf features than the Forerunner watches, which are not as heavily used by golfers according to their data anyways. So there's deeper features on the golf side on the Fenix, et cetera, lineup, Epix, and so on. And so those make sense, or I can at least wrap my head around them. But we have seen since then, they're continuing to get closer and closer.
Yeah.
Like there's those little differences are continuing to be squashed. Yep. And I think if we fast forward another year and a half, 2 years, I don't think there'll be any unnecessary differences. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, I hope it basically becomes more of a materials and construction type difference.
Totally.
Because I don't know, I certainly see a lot of people with Fenixes and Epix on and stuff like that, but I saw a lot of these on people's wrists this year.
Yeah.
And I think a reason for that, again, is that it kind of splits that difference. And that's, I think, what a lot of people are looking for. So, I would love to see something like this would be a sapphire lens, which would just tick so many boxes in terms of features, durability, without necessarily, needing a heavier and, super durable watch like an Epix there. So, but yeah, Forerunner 965.
Cool.
And next up, we have oh boy. Okay, so this is the...
Can you get it right in one shot?
GBD H2000.
Well done.
Yes. By Casio.
Oh, actually, hold on. You got the title has to be on too, isn't it?
Sorry, the G-Shock Move GBD H2000 from Casio. Anyways, long name aside, they made some massive improvements to this one versus the previous generation. So the previous generation was the biggest, chunkiest watch I have ever tested. And I mean, I have not had the pleasure of putting in my wrist, quite frankly. This completely wearable. It just completely changed the game. So I think they went with like a carbon resin type back here.
There's back.
And so basically they essentially removed a lot of the metal from the construction, which reduced a lot of the weight. Yes, it's less premium in the whole scheme of things, but really for a sports focused watch, wearability is a big factor with something like this. So this brought actually a lot of features that they licensed from Polar.
Yep.
So they brought, I think, like cardio low status, the nightly recharge feature. This was kind of an I would say kind of an easy button for Casio to get more of those physiological metrics without necessarily having to reinvent the wheel.
And also the first time we saw Polar branch out and start, at least publicly anyways, branch out and start selling their metrics to other companies. So if we look back, we had Firstbeat years ago do that. Firstbeat eventually got acquired by Garmin. And best I know at this point, they're no longer selling their data algorithms, if you will, to new clients outside of it. I think they're still servicing existing customers, existing watch companies with those algorithms, but I don't think they can onboard a new company. So Polar is really taking that place going forward potentially. Really interesting to see if Polar can branch out. And I think the good news for Polar there is that this is the best time to hit that in terms of back 5 to 7 years ago, there was interest in the health metrics and those, physiological type metrics, but not to the degree there is today with companies like Apple and Google and Fitbit and Samsung and others and Garmin, et cetera, all really diving in on those features. There's just an extreme amount of interest in that. And this is an area that Polar obviously has tons of history in that area, and it's cool to see them applying that. It'll be interesting to see as well who else joins that fray. I don't think at this point anyone else has announced anything.
I have not heard it.
Leveraging. They said they had at the time multiple customers, but obviously it takes time for that watch to go from development into production or those algorithms on those watches. So it's a long path there.
Yeah. So this one brought a whole bunch of new features like dual frequency satellite support. They have a new heart rate sensor in here. And what's funny is that, performance wise, it really wasn't bad out of the box here. And again, with a G-Shock product, it's going to be hard for them to sway somebody away from, let's say, a Suunto or a Garmin or an Apple Watch. This is really more for G-Shock owners who want to be able to track more of their sports and health. But again, I think this was kind of ticked a lot of those boxes. What's interesting, though, is that they went to a new app with this watch, which didn't have Strava support, which was, I told them, straight up, like, this is a big step for you guys versus the previous generation, but that's a no starter for a lot of people. And there was literally no way for me to get the data out of the watch when I first tested it.
Well, especially Strava too, right? I think you can skip some niche platforms or whatever the case. Like you could even make the argument you could skip Training Peaks, which is definitely not a niche platform, but you could say, hey, like you said, this is targeted at Casio owners more so than Garmin, Suunto, whatever owners. Thus, we're not going to have Training Peaks at launch, whatever the case is. But Strava, and the API implementation is so basic, not in a bad way, but it's so easy to add uploading into Strava. This should have been just a no-brainer sort of thing.
Yeah, they recently did add it, I believe, back in October or so. But that was 6+ months.
Yeah, a long time.
That's a long time. So yeah, I actually want to go back and retest it now that I can actually see the data in detail. But like I said, the data didn't look bad from a bird's eye view on this watch. But with Casio, I know it was a long time since the first generation to this H2000 right here. So I think it's just going to be like a lot of other companies where I think you really do need to make sure to support the device ongoing to, have, more sport profiles, new features, keep these devices going so people don't necessarily have to buy a new device. Yep. Yeah. So that's the H2000.
Next to that, we got the equally styled sort of thing, right? The not Casio, not G-Shock, Garmin Instinct 2X. And this is notable because one, it's bigger, right? So this is now a much bigger version of Garmin's watches. But two, also really not just Instinct 2. It's like an Instinct 2.5.
It is. I mean, they tend to do this. They even went from the original Instinct to the Instinct Solar. They even did that.
And that was also like an Instinct 1.5.
It totally was. Yeah, they had a new heart rate sensor.
Just like this did, right? There's lots of changes in this from a under feature standpoint. This got training readiness on there. That was a big shift when this got this, and then the other Instincts didn't. It was like, well, wait a second, the other So much confusion, but I'm glad they put it on there. I'm glad that it ended up in the lineup there, because I think it really does make this watch again more equal. Where if you wanted to buy this for the looks, or if you wanted to buy the Forerunner 265, because you preferred AMOLED, you were getting effectively the same features, and that was the goal. And there's obviously some slight differences, given this is a monochrome display and this is a very vibrant display, but functionally speaking, all the under the cover features were essentially the same.
Yeah, I think this one had a few more navigation features.
A few tiny little ones around,
like maybe a hunt profile, stuff like that. I mean, but definitely tailoring to the type of audience, I think, probably that would purchase it. But, just like the previous one before it, the theoretical unlimited battery life, but with this one, because it's larger, you really could get that. I mean, a lot easier, I guess you could say. But yeah, I think this again was just kind of, giving users just another option, since they brought up the Instinct 2X, the Instinct 2S and the regular Instinct 2.
And so also multi-band on here. So not a new heart rate sensor, but added multi-band on this. So multi-band dual frequency GPS on this, which is interesting because in this case, it was more about the antenna and chipset design changes on this compared to the Instinct 2. Like the Instinct 2 was just Garmin's okay GPS, but this is a whole different level up. Even if you turn off multi-band on this, it is far, far better than the Instinct 2 lineup in terms of GPS accuracy.
I think one interesting difference between the multi-band on this versus the Fenix 7 and Epix is that this did not have Sat IQ.
No, Garmin said that they didn't have the processing behind the scenes to be able to pull it off. And I would assume that they're probably not lying there, only because the 255... I think 255 got it as well, right? Even
I can't remember that one, but
we'll take 265 while we're doing that. But the key thing that Garmin's mantra on Instinct, and this is a good mantra to have at this point in time, is battery savings above everything else. So they will err towards the side of battery savings. That's why it takes so darn long to save your activity at the end of it, is because it is reduced processing power, reduced everything in order to get you the literal unlimited battery life that you can get yourself into with the solar editions. So I think it's a fair trade-off in that particular scenario. Let's see. Yeah, auto select on the 265.
Oh, great. Cool. Yeah. But yeah, kind of an interesting omission, but I mean, regardless, still, even with full dual band, full power, I mean, it still gets ridiculously good battery life. So anyways, that's the Instinct 2X. Next up, this was an exciting one.
Yeah.
It's a Suunto Vertical. And in my mind, this was Suunto's really, really new watch in a long, long time. It's funny, they actually did borrow design cues from the 9 Peak and the 9 Peak Pro, but they kind of just enlarged it and kind of made it look like kind of like a rugged tank in very much a good way, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But it brought solar charging, which was amazing. It brought offline maps. What else?
Just a bunch of other new features along the way as well. I'd say is this, by the way, mine or yours?
That is yours because I'm wearing.
I thought it seemed slower. Interestingly, this, the reason I was asking.
Slower in what way?
Just the past few days, the Suunto Vertical has got a firmware update that you got on it that makes the user interface feel faster, as well as new features on it. It matches more of the Suunto Race. And I was like, wait a second, because I hadn't updated mine yet. I had been a Race, but not the actual. You can see the differences here, and now that his over there has the update that has the new user interface on it versus mine does not. So, but this, I would say, this is the most important watch that Suunto's had in years, up until the Race that we'll talk about later on. And the reason is adding those offline maps. And while those maps aren't to the same level as Garmin is from a detail standpoint, it is the first step towards getting there. You have to start somewhere. And that was true when, COROS added mapping, I guess a couple of years ago now. You have to start somewhere on that journey in order to finally catch up to things. And it represented for Suunto really a big shift forward in their watches to getting back to focusing on the things that people were asking for. And so it's cool to see that. And then also cool to see the update that it just got, again, last couple of days, a week ago or so now, getting it basically almost all the same features as the Suunto Race that came out, I guess, a month or so ago. And in that was just a bunch of features. We're talking like 30 new software features. And some of them are minor. Some of them are things like seeing the new widgets like that. And some of them are more moderate, like seeing HRV status right there. And so those are all things that do matter. And I think that for a long time, Suunto didn't necessarily see the value in things like HRV and all these other metrics that it's death by 1,000 cuts for Garmin's competitors. And I think Suunto and now Polar and COROS as well are seeing that and realizing that whether or not you want to compete on features, that's how you're being judged in the marketplace. And especially if you can't compete on accuracy or style or something like that. Again, years ago, Suunto and Polar in particular could actually compete on accuracy, and they had the claims of being more accurate than Garmin. And eventually they lost that ability, and Garmin became equally, if not better, from an accuracy standpoint. And so that was no longer a competition category. And now they have to go back to competing on not necessarily having the most features, but having the features that are most valuable to their particular group of customers.
Yeah, and from an accuracy standpoint, it's two sides of the coin on this one. But on the GPS side of things, astoundingly good.
Very, very good. Yeah,
astoundingly good. I think they just absolutely hit the nail on the head on this one.
Yeah, Suunto, I was talking to them about it this past summer when they were talking about antenna design and GPS design and all that kind of stuff. And again, you've heard me say it a lot lately that antenna design is probably the most important part of whether or not these watches will be accurate in 2023. Garmin, Suunto, COROS, Polar, I'm guessing probably Casio as well, are all using the exact same GPS chipset. They have slight differences in that they have different firmware versions for each company. So Garmin gets a different firmware version than Suunto, than Polar and COROS and so on. And that matters to a degree, but even more than that is the antenna design. And when I was talking with Suunto about it this summer, they talked about how, for them in their testing, 1/10 of a millimeter in difference in where that antenna was placed and the materials around it from a bezel standpoint was the difference between astronomically good and astronomically bad. Like it's that detailed. It is things like materials of the bezel. It's fun to put a big old metal something on there, but if that big old metal something bezel blocks what you're doing out of the covers, then it's all for naught, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll talk about the flip side of the coin there.
Yep.
Or the flip side of the watch is the heart rate sensor. And this is one area that I have just really never gotten great results out of a Suunto watch. And I think, unfortunately, it continues that trend on this one. It's kind of down there.
It's down there. So they use LifeQ sensor. I believe LifeQ is a South African company, I think. But it's a third-party company. They've been licensing their optic heart rate sensor package for a number of years now. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't work that well. It's as simple as that. I haven't minced words with reviews. You haven't either. It's not great. And I don't know, sometimes you don't know. And when you're licensing an external package, is that because you're not giving enough power? So in other words, is Suunto not giving this particular sensor package enough power to do its job, or is that particular sensor package from that company just not great at its job to begin with? My guess here is it's probably more towards it's not great to begin with, because I think there's things they would do if they at this point could do anything with it. I'm really hoping in whatever watch comes next in 2024, 2025, they either find a new sensor company or a new sensor from that company that is legitimately decent.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's becoming the most obvious gap in the lineup for them at this point.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I think this year was a big year for Suunto, and we'll talk about their other release in just a bit. But I think they did a lot of things right this year. Their next watch, I think this is the number one priority.
Yep,
realistically.
Where's the pull yours from, by the way?
Huh?
Where's yours? The wrist?
On my wrist. So yeah, I'm actually testing out all the that new software update. So look for that video soon. So that's why it's on my wrist at this point. So next up, we have the Mobvoi Ticwatch 5 Pro. So this was Mobvoi's Wear OS 3 watch. The Ticwatch Pro 3 was supposed to get Wear OS at some point. Or the Wear OS update. I don't think they ever got it. I'll have to look back and maybe I'm wrong at this point, but basically this one runs Wear OS 3. This one is kind of just that alternative, I guess you could say, for someone who may not necessarily want a Samsung watch, may not necessarily want a Google Pixel, but realistically, this is actually a very full-featured fitness watch for sure. So in terms of compared to a Samsung Galaxy Watch or a Pixel Watch 2 or something along those lines, this actually has quite a few features on it. And it has a really nice look to it too. It doesn't have LTE support or anything like that. And unfortunately doesn't have external heart rate support either. But I think it really does a good job pretty much everywhere. It gives a lot of feedback. Did you test this one? You didn't test it.
I didn't test this one, no.
Okay, yeah, no, but one unique thing about it that you can see on the screen right now is that it has a dual layer display. So basically this top layer right here versus something like a regular AMOLED display like this Venu right here. So this one basically will kind of just dim to a lower brightness. What this one does is that it actually turns off the AMOLED display behind it and then turns on this kind of LCD. I can't remember the exact name of the technology that they use here, but it basically turns off the AMOLED display and kind of enables this kind of low power display on top of it. And with that, I mean, I think you can get up to 4 to 5 days out of it. But for a smartwatch with an AMOLED display, that's pretty darn good.
That's cool. We saw that, I think, a couple years ago, Casio did something similar. Where you could switch back and forth.
So it's not necessarily a unique thing, but it's a more unique thing in the industry. What was kind of neat about that display, though, is that they actually changed the background color in certain modes. So what was cool is that in workouts and stuff like that, that gray that you see right there, that would actually change to like orange, red based on your heart rate zones.
Oh, wow.
So kind of innovative use out
cool.
of it.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Nice, makes it glanceable.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it did come with a bit of training feedback, like, running VO2 max. It also came with cycling VO2 max. However, it does not have external sensor support.
It's funny to me. I don't understand why there is this hesitancy among non-endemic endurance brands to add external heart rate sensor support, right? Like Fitbit, exactly, really comes to mind. I mean, it's such a... Here's the thing. These watches are reviewed by sports people, right? So like you and I, at the end of the day, we're the ones and others in this category that review them. And when we review them, they're coming a little bit from our slanted opinion about having a heart rate sensor. And this allows you to escape if your sensor is bad, right?
Totally.
And so when you don't have that, then there's no, it just kills the product, because it's one of those you can say, like in the case of Suunto, right? A heart rate sensor is bad, but hey, you can connect up to a chest strap and it's fine, right? And the same with even the Polar Vantage V3 right now. The heart rate sensor is not great at the moment. Maybe it'll get fixed or whatever, but that's one you can connect to a chest strap and it's all fine, right? And because in most cases, when these are bad, we're talking about during workout usage. Most companies are more or less fine in nighttime and HRV, all that kind of stuff. It's fine. Like it's the movement that gets them all dorked up. And so like hardcore sports movement, not just, meandering around the bed or something. So the point there being that it's such an easy button thing, and connecting to the Bluetooth heart rate standard is so basic. It's been basic for 15 years now. I don't understand why companies don't just check that box and be done with it.
Well, yeah, and the other side of it was with the cycling VO2 max is that since it doesn't connect to power meters, it can't really calculate your cycling VO2 max. So basically, you're throwing numbers into the wind here. And I was getting I think I got a VO2 max of something like 90. Thank you very much.
Damn, Lance.
On that one.
Lance and beyond.
So basically the explanation there is that with cycling VO2 max, that really can't be measured just based on your speed, which is basically that's what it's trying to do. Speed and elevation, it's impossible. Speed, elevation, heart rate. So basically you have other factors like wind that come into play. So, if you're going 10 miles an hour, but there's a 30 mile an hour wind in front of you, you're probably going to be pushing out some watts at that point, but you could be going 30 miles an hour, but you have a tailwind. And so basically the numbers were kind of all over the place. So that was something that I certainly said, take that with a jug full of salt on that metric. So, but I think that Mobvoi is going in the right direction, though. I see a lot of features here that makes me know that they're going in that really more sports-focused direction. So I think they have some things to do, such as external sensor support. So, but yeah, I think they really are going in the right direction with that watch. So curious to see. And next up, we have the Fenix 7 Pro and the Epix Gen 2 Pro. I'm just going to call it Epix Pro, by the way. Yeah, that's going to be easier. Yep. So these were, I don't know, you could call them a Fenix 7.5 almost.
Again, another, half release, if you will.
Half release, I guess you could say. Yeah. So with this one, with the Fenix 7 Pro and the Epix Pro, I guess we'll first start out with the Fenix 7 Pro. Yep. The Flashlight. I've said it once and I've said it again. The flashlight feature, which is the dedicated LED flashlight that you get on these watches, it's probably one of the most underrated, but probably most utilized features that someone will probably use once they get the watch. So they brought the flashlight that was originally launched in the Fenix 7X to all 3 sizes of the Fenix 7 Pros. Yep. And I think the other big hardware change was the Elevate Gen 5 sensor on the back.
Yeah, the new optical heart rate sensor. And that would then later on in the year get ECG access. But basically this optical heart rate sensor is Garmin's V5, as you mentioned, their next gen optical heart rate sensor. We'd see it then start to roll out across a number of different watches over the course of the rest of the year. And it's really setting the stage for Garmin to do a lot of things. And, one of those things here in this case is the ECG access. And then again, later on, also the wrist heart rate sensor, wrist temperature sensor that is just being rolled out probably a couple days before this video went out. And if it didn't go out, then you won't even hear this section at all. But we've been using it now for like a month and a half or something. So wrist temperature sensing, something that, I think still has, in Garmin's scenario, it's not super clear as to how they're going to leverage that yet in terms of other metrics. They just show it right now. But I think we've seen companies like Oura and Whoop with the Whoop band using that for ovulation estimates and things like that. And I think we'll see other companies. Apple does a little bit of that to a different degree, but that's something I'm sure Garmin will probably jump on as well.
Yeah, and I think some kind of more minor updates is that they also updated the MIP backlight on this one. So this one has just a lot more contrast to it. They have like a auto brightness mode. Although this was adding another SKU to the Fenix 7 lineup, it was a little bit more clear in terms of differentiation between the Sapphire, non-Sapphire versions where, all of them got the same storage, multi-band, all that sort of thing. So I think Garmin's probably learning there that, it's probably just making materials, make the rest of the features kind of the same.
And it's cool to see too on this as well that all the software features on this watch within a few months came to the existing Fenix 7 series and then its counterpart, the Epix series. And we've seen that carry through. So up until now anyways, all software features that didn't require some hardware component, for example, ECG requires the hardware of this particular watch, but otherwise everything else, software feature-wise, went to the Fenix 7 as well. And again, we'll have to see how long Garmin was clear when they made the announcement that would be the case for a period of time, like a medium distance period of time, but probably not forever. And I'm not asking for forever, but I think it'd be nice to see those features aligned until at least the Fenix 8 or whatever the case is, right? And I think that would make sense in my brain.
I think that if they were able to align their software feature sets across their different divisions, that would certainly help them probably keep the software release cycle probably easier for previous generation watches too.
Well, the thing is, like you mentioned, this is a dot release, like a middle release. And, Garmin has a very clear TikTok sort of pattern in how they do their Fenix lineup, especially where, you have the Fenix 7 and then the Fenix 7 Pro. In Garmin's domain, we've seen a lot of discussion about this the last few days. I've written a post almost finished I might publish around this where from the average consumer standpoint, they don't realize that the Fenix 7 Pro is simply the next version of the Fenix 7. Like it's considered another version down the road. It's not considered a tiered level up here where it's like Apple Watch versus Apple Watch Ultra. Like that's not the way Garmin works. When Garmin changes the second half of their name, so in the case of the Fenix 3, it was the Fenix 3, then the Fenix 3 HR. HR represented the second version of that. It went to the Fenix 5 and the Fenix 5 Plus, and then the Fenix 6 and the Fenix 6 Plus, and the Fenix 7 and the Fenix 7 Pro. Each one of those is considered a new successor to that. And so that's an area where I don't know how Garmin solves their naming standard, except just not doing that, because it confuses people. Like the number of comments we've had, especially in the Black Friday time period, where people have said, I'm waiting for the Fenix 8 because it's been almost 2 years since the Fenix 7 came out. And it's like, well, no, this came out 5 months ago. This is the next step up from that. It's the Fenix 8 will eventually happen because of course it will. I don't have to know anything secret to know that there will be a Fenix 8. I don't know if there'll be a Fenix 9 to be fair.
I'm waiting for the Fenix 13 personally.
Yeah. But we'll talk about that in an Epix in a second. But the point there being that I think that's something that's worthwhile for Garmin to figure out how to make that more clear to people.
I will counter that argument though too, and this fast forwards us to the Apple Watch Ultra 2. That it's also challenging for a company to do a completely new iteration too. Sometimes, because that's what we'll talk about with the Apple Watch Ultra 2 here in just a second. So so yeah, I mean, it's one of those, like, do you wait long enough where the watch is completely different, like it would be like maybe another year past this watch, or do you just release this with a Pro name on it? Still, I mean, I think it is a substantial update to the original Fenix 7s though.
Yeah, and I think that would almost require Garmin adopting an Apple-like software release. Like in the case of the Apple Watch, for them, they release WatchOS 10, and it goes back to watches from many years ago. And I think, like, if Garmin were to get to that point where, from Apple's perspective, they're adding a new Apple Watch Series 9 and Ultra 2 not because they expect the Apple Watch Series 8 people to go from 8 to 9, or even the Ultra 1 to go to Ultra 1 to Ultra 2, but because they want it so that the people on Apple Watch Series 6 or 7 go, oh yeah, 9 now has a nicer hardware something or other, right? But the software is all the same across them, by and large. And that's where I think if Garmin could get there, then they could go to, hey, we're just going to drop a new version every year of the Fenix and call it 8, 9, 10, 13, 20, whatever it is.
Yeah, and we'll actually loop back to the software update thing in just one second, but we also do need to talk about the Epix Pro that came out again with all three sizes. All three sizes had a flashlight. The original Epix was, in my mind, kind of Garmin testing the waters to see if AMOLED was going to be a viable option for the outdoor sports-focused market. And it absolutely has been. And this was Garmin going full on and basically with the Epix Pro.
But that also, it's funny, like, again, the most common question outside of when the next Fenix 8's coming is people not realizing the Epix is the AMOLED Fenix.
Yes.
And I suspect for people watching this video, if you've made it this far, you're probably a watch geek. And I suspect Garmin is watch geeks, but like, I don't think they realize how many people don't understand the Epix is simply the Fenix with AMOLED display.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. And I do actually have a Fenix 7 versus Epix Pro video, which has gotten an astounding number of views, considering all it is really the displays. It translates into other things such as battery life, as well as kind of like real world usability, kind of like we were talking about earlier with the AMOLED displays at night. Yep. There's all these nuances that you basically kind of have to consider between the displays. You're not really going to go wrong with either of them, but there's considerations on both sides. But again, like, this is Garmin like going full in.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you could answer that question in one word. What's the difference? AMOLED. Right? That's it. Right? Versus if you were to say, what's the difference between Instinct 2 and Fenix? It'd be like, this is going to take a second. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. And it'll be really, we were talking about this, I think, in last couple of days somewhere. Like, what will they call the next Epix?
Yeah. So going back to the naming convention thing. So when the Epix, I don't want to say originally, the Epix originally came out a long time ago. The OG. The Epix that I think all of us are probably more familiar with is actually the Epix Gen 2. Yep. This is technically the Epix Gen 2 Pro, or Pro Gen 2, whatever.
It's a mess because the original Epix, and it's funny because Garmin knows this. Like, I remember when they first mentioned this name when talking about it before they released the original Epix. Sorry, the middle Epix, right? Not the 2022 Epix. And I was like, but what are you calling it? There's like, well, we're calling it Garmin Epix, and then it'll put parentheses Gen 2. And like, officially it's parentheses Gen 2 after it. But again, everyone just calls it Epix. But the OG Epix is back from 2015, big old square like monster of a laptop on your wrist. And my challenge is, what do you call the next version, right? So you went from Epix Gen 2 to Epix Pro, which is again just the next version. Is this Epix 3? Or is this Epix Gen 3 or is it Epix 2?
But why is it Gen 2? Why wasn't it just 2?
I cannot wait for the day that someone at Garmin will tell us what the next version will be. Like, it'll be like, what would you decide? What are you doing here?
Yeah, because I mean, I've had definitely comments about like, is this the Epix Gen 3? I'm like, it kind of is, in my mind. I think between Fenix and Epix, there's a naming conundrum going on here, which needs to be fixed, I think, probably. Yeah.
Especially because, and then you've also got Enduro, right? Just to muddy this waters up entirely. At some point in the probably very near future, there will be no reason to have Enduro and Fenix exist anymore, right? Enduro existed at a time when they took the Fenix 6 lineup and they ripped a bunch of stuff out of it and they said, boom, now we got a long-lasting battery life called the Enduro 1, right? But they took a Fenix 6 and gutted it first. Versus with the Enduro 2, they took a Fenix 7 and added more battery to it at the end of the day. So they didn't gut it first. So it's basically Fenix 7 Plus versus Fenix 6 Minus. Point there being, when you go to the Fenix 7X Pro, the battery life makes it so that there's really no point for an Enduro anymore. Enduro 2 anyways. And so will they make the Enduro 2 long-term, like Enduro 3, will that be a super long battery life? Or will they say, Enduro, you've had a good run, and the Fenix 8X is the new Enduro?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have seen some, races to get the longest battery life possible. I think we're getting to a point where battery life is getting to be extremely good across the board, where, I guess if you want that trophy of longest battery life, that may be a reason for that Enduro 3. But still, again, just like you said, the Fenix 7X Pro has ridiculously good battery life already. But like I said, it really was, the Epix Pro really was Garmin saying like, AMOLED is here to stay and the Epix series is here to stay, and showing that obviously the demand was there even for some smaller sizes. Again, the flashlights in all three of them. Feature set is going to be the same as the Fenix 7 Pro. Again, same Gen 5 sensor, all that good stuff. But yeah, this was a pretty exciting release for me personally.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah. And then next up, kind of looping back to what we were just talking about a second ago with software releases, is Apple right about here released the WatchOS 10 update. And so with the WatchOS 10 update, they had some new navigation features in terms of offline topo maps. And then what's probably most exciting for maybe you and I was that they came out with external cycling sensor support, speed and cadence sensors, as well as cycling power meters.
Yeah, and it was cool to see. It's one of those areas where, we talked with Apple a lot about this, like in a sense of why, right? Like that's meaning that in a good way, but cycling power meters is relatively niche in the grand scheme of the world. But Apple choosing to add it to their feature set really steps up the game for their watch, and in particular for the Apple Watch Ultra, in terms of if someone's looking at features, it's a checkbox. They go, oh, like a cyclist is looking, they go, oh, doesn't have power meter support, I'm going to get a Garmin watch instead. Even though they may have an iPhone and a whole bunch of Apple things, they want that watch that supported it. And so it'll be interesting to see what that adoption looks like over time, and what companies are doing that. And also with WatchOS 10 was a new structured workout support as well. So allowing entities like at some point, Training Peaks, but also Trainer Road's already there, and Final Surge is already there, and a few others, to have an easy button option for getting structured workouts onto the Apple Watch that does not require them to write their own Apple Watch app. Which is a huge deal, because, up until this point, when a company like Training Peaks, etc., wanted to get workouts to your Apple Watch, they had to write their own entire Apple Watch fitness app, which is just a huge waste of resources for really everyone involved.
Yeah. So that was, again, bringing a lot of new features to older hardware, which I think is great for everyone. So next up is the Amazfit Cheetah.
Yep.
I did not review this one, but you did. So please talk us through this.
Yep. So let me see if I got that. There we go. I love this this particular watch face here. This is one of my.
I don't think it has enough information on it.
It doesn't. Like I love it, and it's a hideous sort of way. To be really clear, this is one of those things that the first time I looked at it, I'm like, good God. But then over time, I don't know why, it's grown on me. I like the red. I like, you can watch as the red here goes around. It's going to slowly, that's the seconds moving around. The heat of the seconds is slowly going around there. Right. It does have multiband and dual frequency GPS. It does have music playback, and it has a bunch of other fitness features. One of the things that we've seen Amazfit do over the last few years is add lots of legitimate fitness features to relatively low priced units. And this one is relatively is the key thing here. I think so it's $300. And so it's dangerous territory though, for this kind of watch, because it puts it really close to something like the 255, 265, etc. And you have to, at that price point, stick the landing on some of those features. And that was a thing that I found with this watch, is that it was goodish, but not great on some of the accuracy components, and some of the way the different physiological data was enumerated on this, that you're like, it's close. And there's little like bugs and stuff like that. And one of the challenges people have had with the Amazfit products over the years is that while the trend for all these companies has been to issue software updates and move things along, Amazfit doesn't tend to do that in a meaningful way. They tend to just give a new watch, right? They tend to be like, hey, here's a new watch. And the older watches don't generally get big software updates and generally don't get the fixes to some of the things that annoy a lot of people. And it's been something that, one of the like litmus tests that I sometimes use for looking at stuff is what the Reddit forum for that particular company, watch brand, product, whatever it is saying. Because generally speaking, people that hang out on Reddit for a given company, whether it's a watch or an action camera or drone, whatever the case is, are the biggest supporters of that particular brand. And there's always questions that like Seagull style, like they come in and they're like, I'm just here because I got a question. And then people answer it. And sometimes someone will come in because they're upset, whatever the case is. But you can generally get the vibe of the room, right? And you're like, everyone here is pretty happy with this, right? The vibe of the Amazfit Reddit forums is not necessarily a happy place. I was surprised when I came in how many people were upset about past wrongdoings. And so that's one of the things I talked to Amazfit about when I had some feedback, is that like at some point as you mature as a company in the space, you can't drop watches and then walk away from them. Yeah. You have to drop a watch, support the watch, bring new features to it. And we have seen a couple of small updates to that over the course of the last few months, but I think people are really looking to have watches supported more than just 6 months.
Yeah, no, I think that's honestly, that was something I certainly saw on my own comments on the video of the Ticwatch Pro 5, as well was the support for the Ticwatch Pro 3, how it was kind of left in the dark. There were a lot of promised updates and never got them. So I think that's going to be a challenge for any company who's coming in at more of that, kind of trying to hit that budget price point and quite frankly lure people away from some of these other brands here because of the price, or maybe going to be their first watch, I guess you could say, or fitness. Is that there certainly is something to be said for brand loyalty. So as much as hitting a good price point is great to lure a customer into your brand, keeping them around is a whole other thing.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. So all right, so next up we have the Samsung Galaxy Watch 6. And well, this was an interesting release, I guess you could say, because last year they had the Watch 5 Pro, which was a really interesting device because it brought like 3 to 4 days of battery life. It had like the offline, it had the navigation features on it as well. And just like super crazy durable build and stuff like that. And this year, they actually brought back the physical rotating bezel on the Watch 6, which they didn't have that before. And I don't know, we're definitely seeing a lot of this trend of like, let's just skip a generation and then, we're going to bring this back. We're going to see this with the Fitbit Charge 6 here in a second here. But yeah, they brought back the physical rotating bezel, which is honestly, it's a great little interface here. It definitely allows you to use the device without necessarily having to use the touchscreen.
And I think that's a trend that we're seeing across the board. In addition to AMOLED, is bringing back the buttons, baby. Like bring back tactile things, right? And so we see that with, again, we'll talk about it in Fitbit. We see that with even Apple in adding the Apple Watch Ultra, obviously with last year so much, but that carrying that through. We're seeing that with other companies where people want buttons on sport watches. I think there was a time period where companies thought that you didn't want buttons. I don't think companies. I think companies that were tech driven believed that somehow touchscreens were always going to be amazing on all scenarios for all things. And you just go out for a run in a rainy day and realize that doesn't work that well. Even just go in the shower, right? And it's like,
your screen starts to
go crazy. So it was nice to see Samsung go back to this. I think this one here, I don't normally order white straps. When I order this watch here, I was like, sure, let's do something different. I'm tired of having a black Samsung watches. I have a whole bucket of black Samsung watches, and this looks nice. Like when you rotate this bezel and see that watch face there, like that looks super, super clean. That looks like man, that's really nice.
No, I mean, I will say it. I've said it like, 5 years in a row now, but seriously, Samsung watches are, in my mind, some of the best designed watches out there. I think they just have such a great classic look to them. And I love wearing them in that regard.
However, on the flip side, literally, again, there's that.
Yeah. I think I named my Samsung review, Samsung Does It Again. And that was actually two different references. One, that they brought back the rotating bezel, but two was the heart rate sensor.
I don't understand how a company this big and this powerful can create such a horrific heart rate sensor.
Well, and this was supposed to be an updated one too, right? I mean, they went into a lot of marketing mumbo jumbo about this heart rate sensor this year, right?
And it's not like they, again, generally speaking, heart rate sensor accuracy is roughly tied sometimes to how much battery power is given to that sensor. You increase the power to the sensor, and that gives you higher levels of accuracy. So when it's on your wrist right now, like does the watches over there, it's in a lower power mode because it's not in sport mode. When you go into sport mode, it increases power to the optical heart rate sensor. It makes it brighter. You can see this, by the way, if you just turn on sport mode, you'll watch it go increase brightness. That's to give it higher accuracy. So like if Samsung had said, hey, we've increased the accuracy here, but reduced battery, or we're giving you more battery life with decreased accuracy. But they didn't say that. They just gave us another really bad optical heart rate sensor, and like astoundingly bad.
Well, and again, the unfortunate thing is that there's no native external heart rate support with Samsung Health. I mean, again, like it's such an easy button for them, and I think that there are certain companies out there that kind of have to read the room, or like, all right, read the room, and it's like, all right, is someone who's going to wear my watch going to wear a heart rate sensor? Well, maybe not, but at the same time, like if they're looking for the best accuracy and they're looking for the feature set of this watch, maybe they will.
Well, and again, to compare it to what Apple's done, right? So Apple has had heart rate sensor stuff there for years, but most notably, when they added cycling power meter support, the lift from a coding standpoint to add cycling power meter support is massively higher than adding heart rate sensor pairing support, right? Because in the case of heart rate sensor pairing support, they're already recording heart rate data. So it's just a sensor pairing, versus from a cycling standpoint, for Apple to add all that stuff in, they have to add all the data fields in for cycling power. They have to add all the junk that comes with that, and they have to deal with the hellscape that is the cycling power meter standard, which means that every single Bluetooth cycling power meter does something different. And that's just the reality of the industry. It sucks. They knew it. They went into it. They dealt with it. You just have to fight every single power meter individually, versus heart rate sensor standard has been standardized for 15 years. Like it's locked in, very, very solid. So again, just such an easy button thing they could do that would at least mitigate the dumpster fire that is a heart rate sensor.
Yeah. So I mean, like, maybe next year don't come out with a feature-like body composition, which how many people are really going to use on this watch, versus external heart rate sensor support, which would just seriously, from our perspective, oh boy, like that would give it such a more passing grade.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right. So next up, we have the COROS Pace 3. So I can't even remember how many years it has been since the Pace 2, at least 3 so probably 3 years. So this one, it's basically a smidge larger, a smidge more expensive. They added dual band satellite system support to it, but other than that, it's just another really great budget offering from COROS.
$229, really solid offering. All COROS really had to do here was to basically keep the same, and they would still succeed, and they did that. They increased the price from $199 to $229, and on a percentage basis, you're like, that's a pretty big increase. But they haven't increased the price ever on the COROS Pace series since the very, very beginning. Since it first came out in 2016 or 17, they haven't ever increased the price. So seeing that here, and then seeing the multiband in that, and in this case, this is by far COROS's most accurate GPS watch from a GPS standpoint. Not even the same category. Like their Vertex 2, which is their higher end watch, and their Epix 2 Pro and Epix 2, not even in the same ballpark as this here.
No, this is an incredible bang for your buck. I mean, again, so I think we're seeing prices increase all over the board for every consumer device out there. So I think that is to be expected, and actually it does come with a touchscreen too, by the way. Yeah. So no, I think it's kind of like the Forerunner 255 and 265, where if you're just looking for a really just full featured watch, this is a great way to go.
Yeah. And the thing you're saving, you're not getting whatever compared to some of the other options is the COROS app, I would say, is the area that probably needs the most filling out longer term in terms of.
They do, you know, they're
working on it.
Yeah, they always, other than their heart rate monitor, this is actually the only piece of COROS hardware they really came out with this year, I believe. Yeah, so COROS, they don't come out with a lot of new hardware, but they do come out with a lot of new software features. So again, that's going to be one of these companies, very much like Apple, where they come out with new software features all the time that go back to devices as far back as they can go. And, you know, and I would say that, I think they're a good company in that regard.
Yep.
All right. And then next up, we have actually Garmin kind of consolidating their lineup a little bit with the Garmin Venu 3. And basically, this was a Venu 2 Plus with a next generation heart rate sensor in the back. They also brought open water swimming to this guy.
There is power meter support. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And then also the new GPS chipset, not multi-band, which is a little quirky. But as I said many times this year, I don't care how a company arrives at an accurate GPS track. I really don't. I don't care if they use multiband or dual frequency, whatever you want to call it, or don't use that, or use pigeons to fly it around, as long as they get there. And in this case, Garmin got there. Garmin got largely equal performance to what you would find on their multiband Fenix 7 Pro in almost every scenario. Like there's a couple, handful of cases, edge cases, and really, really tough scenarios where it might be not as perfect, but it's still leagues beyond their older watches or honestly some of the competitors' multi-band options.
I think this is an interesting one though, because the Venu 3 versus something like the Forerunner 265, I actually put together a video on those two watches. So these two watches basically share about the same price point, but they actually have very similar features now, in the sense that this one actually has open water swimming. This one has cycling power meter support at this point, but the Forerunner 265 doesn't have the microphone and speaker on this guy, plus more of the more smartwatchy features, I guess you could say.
And this, whereas like the Venu doesn't have triathlon support and does not have track running support.
Yeah, and does have the training feedback that you.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is where, again, I think I hear just so many people like, I just want a speaker and microphone on a Forerunner 265. So that's where these two watches, it's really a hard choice between these two watches now, because you're talking about smartwatch features versus more training features on this guy.
I don't believe they should both exist.
No, at this point they should marry these two together.
Yeah. I mean, they're virtually identical in terms of displays and like all that stuff. Like there's very, very similar. Like there is no good reason for both of these watches to exist. If you were a new company like starting out doing this, you'd be like, why would I have two watches here? And I think this is one of those things where I believe Garmin believes that more SKUs is somehow better, and it's really hard to argue that when the earnings are as good as they are, et cetera, from a financial and Wall Street standpoint. But it's also hard to argue a non-existent thing, which is having less confusion, right? The number of people that are like, I can't decide between this and this and this, and fine, Apple Watch done, right? Because it's you have one choice to make. Do you want Apple Watch Ultra? Do you want Apple Watch regular? And then within that, you decide what size you want and all that. That's fine, colors. But like, I can see how people just give up on this stuff and just be like, that's just easier to figure out.
Oh, yeah, totally. But yeah, I mean, in terms of health features too, later on down the road, this also got with the Gen 5 sensor on the back here, as well as the metal bezel. This did get the ECG update as well. So kind of bringing, again, another health feature that they didn't necessarily advertise when.
And we saw nap tracking get rolled out here too.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. So yeah, I think this is a very full-featured, more health-focused smartwatch with some surprisingly good sports features in it.
Yeah. It's I have no complaints about the watch itself. I just cannot reconcile why there are so many different things.
Yeah. And it also brought out some new, more smartwatch related features for Garmin, such as like there was actually an on-screen keyboard for Android users. There was also image support for text messages and stuff like that too. So again, we're starting to see Garmin put a lot more focus on the health as well as the smartwatch focus features as much as they can. Yeah. But it's probably time for them to do a little bit more consolidation.
Yeah.
Next up, we have the Apple Watch Series 9 as well as the Apple Watch Ultra 2. And these were certainly S-tier upgrades. So, talking about feedback from the comment section and stuff like that, this would be argued like you could probably call this the Apple Watch Ultra S and the Apple Watch Ultra, the Apple Watch Series 8S, I guess you could say. Yeah, in terms of the new hardware features with this guy, so we had the new double tap feature, but then they also got brighter displays on both of these, as well as dimmer displays. Yeah. So we're just kind of, but it's important.
It is, yeah. It's one of those things that allowed them. Do I think it's Apple flexing for the sake of flexing? Absolutely, right? That no one needed a display as bright as the new Apple Watch Ultra was going to. It was perfectly readable, the Apple Watch Ultra 1 on top of a mountain on a sunny day or at a beach in the middle of summer, like totally readable there. And the same was true of the original Apple Watch, Series 8, now going to Series 9. Series. Any of the versions from the last couple of years, upgrading had been perfectly fine. But they also did decrease the brightness, which allows them to save a bit of battery at night in particular by reducing that even further. And you can still see it just fine. And it wasn't like the previous nit level was too bright at night or anything like that. They just helped them to save battery, to put battery into other things with that new faster processor.
Yeah. The faster processor, though, that was definitely a big part of the keynote this year. But I don't know, like at the same time, every year I feel like we see the slide come up for battery life. The all day 18 hour on the Series 9 and then the 36 hours on the Apple Watch Ultra 2. And I don't know, like I sort of feel like a little collective sigh sometimes, from the audience. Yeah. And so, I mean, we heard a lot of focus on the faster processor, which a lot of improvements with processors are also around efficiency, but they chose to put a brighter display into the device. So it's one of those, like, I'm not sure if they're just trying to keep the same battery life expectation, or what exactly is the...
I don't know. I feel like, it's, if you ask, I guess the thing is, like, if we were to walk outside and freeze our ass off and ask random people on the street, as they walk down the street with the Apple Watch, what they wanted, I guarantee you every single person is going to say longer battery life. Like, no one's going to say, I want a brighter display. I want a faster processor. They're going to say, I want battery life. Like, I wish I could understand the logic there. And I don't think either of us have ever got, either privately or publicly, an answer on why they just stick with the one day, right? Because again, these companies can do this. I know that, there's a reason why Garmin with the AMOLED display can get 6, 10, 15 days in a similar size, package, and Apple only gets a day and a half or 2 days, depending on the watch. And that's because these displays are doing more things faster, right? They have, Garmin's are more tuned to reduce refresh rates and reduce all that kind of stuff that, you can watch a YouTube video on this if you wanted to, and you can't really do that on a Garmin AMOLED watch. And that's okay. There's apps and scenarios that Apple is developing for third-party developers where you do want those high refresh type scenarios. But I think as they showed, though, with their, reduced battery options that you can enable on these watches, that there is an awareness that people want longer battery life. And I just would love to see them take a year where they reinvested the increased, battery capacity, not into a brighter display or more processing power, but into just more battery life.
Yeah, they do also do a lot more of the background than a Garmin device does in terms of like the operating system and whatnot too, because these really are like smartphones on your wrist. So they really are doing a lot more. So it's definitely, part display technology. You'll definitely see that in refresh rate.
Yep.
But also a lot to do with what's going on behind the scenes. So there is also obviously that trade-off. So, and then speaking of that, there's also a feature I'm not sure if anybody asked for, but the double tap feature. So this was an additional way of interacting with your watch with only just one hand, where you could scroll through the smart stack, you could answer declined calls, certain features like that. The feedback from the crowd, I guess you could say, was that from the internet was that this feature already existed with assistive touch.
Right.
Yeah. So and that's very much true in a sense. However,
there's nuance. It's sort of like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square, right? There are scenarios where they are directly overlapping, and then there are scenarios where they are not. And I'd say probably the biggest, easiest way to describe it is assistive touch was mostly a nightmare to try to learn and use efficiently. Double tap just kind of works. And now, could Apple have rolled out double tap to older watches? They say no-ish.
Yeah, I mean, something to do with the new neural engine, basically on the new Apple Watch Ultra 2 and the Series 9 that enables the double tap feature. That's what we've been told on that. So is it a useful feature? I think it can be useful in certain scenarios. It does have a limited feature set compared to assistive touch. So assistive touch is literally for you to get around the entire interface of the watch, where double tap allows you to do certain things. Yeah.
And of course, these are running WatchOS 10. So all those features that we talked about earlier on, at this point in the table, they all came into production here on these watches. And roll back previously.
I don't know. So again, going back to whether these should have been called the Series 9 or the Ultra 2 versus like an S-year upgrade, I don't know. It's kind of tough. That was certainly the feedback. Again, in addition to double tap, I guess you could say, was that, it's like, oh, it's, it's not really an Ultra 2. It's not really a Series 9. It's not really a, actual upgrade. Well, what's great is that you don't have to go buy a new watch.
No,
right? Like your Ultra 1's going to work just fine at that point. You don't necessarily have to upgrade to the Ultra 2 unless you really need it. And here's the thing too, is that, I think a lot of companies, even let's say with like COROS right here. So we have the Pace 2 and the Pace 3. Well, it increased the price a little bit. These didn't increase in price at all. These are the same price. So it's not like they're demanding more money for, quite frankly, kind of a just a slight upgrade, I guess you could say.
If you were going to a bakery, you want to have the freshest baguette, right? And this is basically just this is simply just the new baguette for this year. And it's Apple's. It's the way they're doing things. I think we're seeing Garmin and others go to that. We saw Samsung go to that, and others were. It doesn't have to be a major upgrade each year. It's just simply that for the person that goes out and buys that watch this fall, they know they have the newest watch. And the naming convention works, right? Like everyone can walk into a Best Buy or whatever electronics store you have and go, what's the latest Apple Watch? And you go, it's Series 9. Boom, done, right? Like there isn't what's the Plus and the Pro and how does this fit in? And it's just simplicity. Like simplicity converts sales.
Yep. All right, cool. Let's move on to the Garmin vivoactive 5. Sort of muddying the waters.
I was say this is not simplicity.
This is not simplicity. So the Garmin vivoactive series was kind of the original, more smartwatch focused series. So they had the vivoactive HR, they had the vivoactive 3, but those were
this was Garmin's vivoactive name was its introduction to Venu. Eventually became splintered in Venu, but that was their first smartwatch, if you will. And it was the thinnest GPS watch in the world at the time when it came out. Originally, this little square thing way back when. And I think we all thought that line was dead. They stopped at the vivoactive 4 mid-base display.
I loaded that one.
And then they're like, we had a shovel. We dug that thing out of the grave, and we're like, we're going to call this the vivoactive 5. Exactly. And here's the thing, this is a great little watch.
Oh, it is.
All it is, they took a Venu 3 from a month prior, and they said, chop off $100 the price, chop a bunch of random features off, give it the older heart rate sensor, and done.
Yeah.
And as I said in my review, from a pricing standpoint, this is essentially the Apple Watch SE of Garmin's lineup. Maybe a little bit pricier though, but that's where that fits in. But I really struggle with the vivoactive 5 name. Versus calling it the Venu SE for that matter, Venu 3 SE.
Exactly.
Again, this is muddying the waters. You had killed off vivoactive series. You had put that in the grave. The whole thing was buried. The flowers were growing. And then it's yes, one less lineup. And then we added more lineups.
Yeah. So basically you could think about it if you're looking at Garmin's more smartwatch focused lineup, you could think of it as Venu SQ2 at kind of the budget level. The vivoactive 5 / Venu Mini, whatever you want to call them, and then the Venu 3. So this really is the in-between Venu.
Yeah.
And
again, this is a great little watch. The kicker is, I think I recommended this to my mom or something like that. She was looking at a new watch to replace her older Venu watch. And I'm like, this is perfect. This is what you want and need. And it makes perfect sense as a product. It's just the name is one more thing to explain to someone.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, again, great watch. So basically you can think of this as like kind of a Venu 3 Mini or a little bit better Venu SQ2. Great little fitness watch. Next up, we have the Fitbit Charge 6, and talking about, Fitbit does it again. So they brought back the button on the side here, and they brought back another thing.
Yeah, horrific GPS performance.
Yeah. So I guess talking about the good things first. So they actually did bring some Google features to this. So there's like Google Pay on here.
Yeah, there's YouTube music control. There's Google Pay. There's Google Map turn-by-turn navigation. Yeah. This is like a very clear Googleification of the Fitbit lineup. Like when the Fitbit Charge 5 was released last year or 2 years ago?
5 was...
I think 2 years ago. Maybe last year. When the Fitbit 5 was released, Charge 5 was released. Yeah. They already had merged with, they've been acquired by Google. And at that point in time, there wasn't a lot of Googleification going on. There's some very minor things, but it was clear like Team Google and Team Fitbit had not had a campfire together yet in any meaningful way. And it was almost like they were sort of mad at each other in some ways. Like it felt like there were times where you're like, did you ever talk? And the answer, by the way, was clearly no. But now there's clearly talking. Like there was very much clear coordination between the Charge 6 and the Pixel Watch 2 in terms of feature sets being rolled out, the features being rolled out, and this here having a very clear Google first integration into Fitbit. It's still a Fitbit watch through and through, but you do need a Google account on this versus I did in the past. And they also, the heart rate sensor on there, they leaned very heavily into the machine learning algorithms of the Pixel Watch, mostly Pixel Watch 1 from last year, but some of those carry through into the Pixel Watch 2, which gave it an increase in accuracy of the heart rate. And we had sort of hoped that would also mean an increase in accuracy of the GPS. We had hoped that maybe they would fix the GPS issues on this. And what this essentially is in like 20 seconds or less is that the antenna for this watch sits on essentially the bottom edge here. So when you put it on your wrist, when you make it nice and snug, as you should for any watch from a optical heart rate sensor standpoint, that basically reduces the visibility of the GPS. And so the snugger you got, the better heart rate accuracy, but the worse GPS, to the point where it won't even connect to GPS at all. Versus if you put this nice and loose, it'll bounce around a bunch, but then your heart rate performance is really bad, and you can at least get marginal GPS.
I thought you said this was going to be 20 seconds.
And then I lied. So the good news here, though, is that the machine learning algorithms on the heart rate side can, generally speaking, deal with the fact that it's flopping all over the place, and pull together a somewhat cohesive heart rate track that you can leave it pretty loose and still kind of get GPS.
Yeah, I would say kind of. So I have probably 20 outdoor workouts out of this Charge 6. I have one of them that I actually have a full recorded activity for GPS, and I've tried it loose, tight, whatever. I mean, there have been activities where sometimes it just completely stops the activity. Yep. Sometimes it basically draws like a point here, point here, point here, point here, point here on a 40-mile bike ride. Basically, if you're going to be using this for outdoor activities, I would suggest to certainly have it paired to your phone and use the phone GPS mode on this, because that's going to be really probably the most reliable for you on that. So, but still, the one, I haven't put my review out for this quite yet, which will be soon, but realistically, if you're looking for the majority, and I'm talking the majority of the health features that come on the Pixel 6 for like less than half the price, this is a phenomenal deal. I mean, this has
for $159, $99 on sale.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it has ECG. It has a really good heart rate sensor. I mean, it has a lot for the money. And if you're looking to track health, this is a really, really good device right here. Mm-hmm. Yep. But just don't necessarily count on the GPS. So
that's much.
Yep, exactly. And speaking of that, we have the Pixel Watch 2. I haven't finished my full review on this one, but this one is very much like the Series 9 and the Apple Watch Ultra 2, where this is very much an iterative update. All they did with this one was they did improve the heart rate sensor a bit. Yep. They improved the battery life slightly. Yep. And what else about
it? The button's a bit more buttony.
The button's a bit more buttony. Yep. And the straps are just about as strappy.
Yep. Otherwise, I'd say the difference between what they did and Apple did is that Apple had a much bigger, certainly sport focused, but even a general feature focused update from year to year with WatchOS 10. Now this did get, the latest version of Wear OS, which has a bunch of other improvements in there, but those improvements aren't as over the top tangible, I would say, as what WatchOS 10 was, either from a sports standpoint or as a general standpoint. I think we're seeing a minor iteration here. Again, I'm totally fine with minor releases because I think it means the company's still in the game, right? Like, I think there would have been a lot of questions if Google did not release a watch this year. I think there were questions like, is Google still doing watches? Like, are you, even if they were still working on stuff and still supporting and still have software updates, I think they kind of had to release a watch in their second year to really prove that they're still in the game. I would have said, though, the biggest thing I would have wanted, aside from more sport features, was just a bigger version of the watch.
Yeah, no, I think that was, I was fully expecting it this year, but we didn't see it. If that doesn't come next year, I'm going to be absolutely stunned.
Yeah, no, I had a meeting, I don't know, a while before the announcements, and they'd asked me, it was an actual meeting here in Amsterdam, and they asked me, like, what's the one thing that you want to see in this watch, right? And it was all the Google Pixel Watch, like, team executives, whatever. And I'm like, I just want to see a bigger version. There were no smiles at that moment because I think they were like, oh shit, he's not going to be happy about this one then. Because they didn't tell me what was coming up. They just simply was like, we just want to talk about a lot of things. And that was one of those like, I just want to see a bigger version. And they're like, mm-hmm. It was like,
what else?
Anything else? And I was like, more bigger versions.
Yeah. I'm waiting for Google/Fitbit to really hit their stride. And I don't think this was the year. I think they're getting close, but I think there were a lot of high expectations this year from a lot of people, including myself. But I would say next year, Google. Fitbit.
I think next year too. I think and I get it. When you dive into that product category, there is a lot behind the scenes that they have learned over the last year on watches that will never make the news, will never make whatever, the rumor mill is just stuff that you have to deal with when you're like, oh, we're making our own watches now, versus like, they at least had the base of Wear OS existing and dealing with that for a long time. Mm-hmm. But there is stuff that I'm sure took a lot of that team's time over the last year dealing with not the fallout from launching a new watch, but the reality of launching a new product hardware category that they have had to reprioritize and sort out. And so I think by now they've largely got that probably settled. And I think it'd be really interesting to see what next year looks like for them.
Yeah. All right. Next up, did you clean this? You did.
Absolutely not. I wanted that. We had a really hard 10K run this morning.
Yeah, we did. No, I didn't. All right. So next up, we have the Garmin Tactix 7 AMOLED, which was super interesting because considering the intended audience for this device, it comes with an AMOLED display. And this would once again reinforce that AMOLED is here, not even on just more outdoor sports focused watches, but even more tactical watches talk us through this one. You've been wearing it.
So this is, Garmin's always had the tactical kind of focused lineup in the Tactix series, and it's always been a derivative of the Fenix in some way, shape, or form. And it's had, when it first came out, it had like jump master type features on it. And over time, it's morphed as to what those features are. See if we can get this to focus here. That'll work. And so you see some of these, if you go in the up left hand button there, you'll see right here. So night vision mode turns that on. We go into the green, turn it off. Stealth mode basically doesn't save a bunch of data. You have kill switch to go ahead and wipe everything off it, and theoretically you cannot recover this data after the fact. Something I want to retest, because back years ago they introduced on the Instinct lineup, Instinct Tactical. They were like, yeah, it's just more of a delete, not a full-on purge. But I've heard from them that this is now a much more legit kind of DISA level deletion of all the stuff behind the scenes. So I want to have some fun with that. Applied ballistics. So you can go in here and do a bunch of stuff that I know virtually nothing about from a shooting standpoint, but that is there. And again, the focus is more tactical, and you've got this band here, which is very, very stiff.
I tested out the Tactix 7 Pro, and I don't know, I tested it for a few months, and that band never really broke in for me. So if you own one of these tactical bands, would love to hear if these things break in after like however long, because it's not awesome out of the box.
No, it's and And it's funny because in a way, like you put this on, it has great battery life. So you can put it on your wrist and leave it there for a week or however long depending on what GPS time you have on it. I would say like when you put it on, like getting all the loops through is just, it's really such a stiff band material that I like the fab extract concept. Like you see this one here and, but I just wish it was a tiny bit less rigid, so it feels a little bit nicer. But otherwise, this is a great looking watch. It's expensive though.
$1,400.
Yep, US. Compared to the Epix Pro. Yep, but it does have the newer optical heart rate sensor, which is certainly notable on it.
Has ECG as well.
Yep, ECG, etc. So again, just another hardware differentiation of Garmin's, Fenix and Epix sort of alignment there.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting that they have AMOLED on a tactical watch, just because you do have usages where you don't want the display necessarily giving away your location with other people with night vision goggles or anything like that. So for them to put AMOLED display and to think about that sort of implementation in those sort of scenarios, it's kind of interesting. So yeah, if you are the type of person who would utilize something like this, would love to hear your thoughts about it in the Discord or the comments section down below. This is actually just one release, but I kind of brought both of these out because these both look really good. And I think that in terms of comeback story of the year, I think they started here with the Vertical.
Yep.
And then they kind of finished with a really good ending here with the Suunto Race. So the Suunto Race, this is basically the AMOLED version of the Suunto Vertical. They came out with a brand new interface with this. They also have a new rotating dial right here, which is newer than the Vertical as well, but it still has the offline maps. This one actually introduced the new training features like chronic training load, TSS, and then the recovery features like HRV as well, but that did get ported back to the Vertical on a very recent update. But the story about these watches, though, is the price. So this one's the stainless steel version right here. This was the titanium version. $450, $550 for a titanium bezel, stainless steel bezel, sapphire lens, with all those features, with some really good battery life.
Yeah, they went for blood here. Suunto went out of this, and people talk a lot about the Race is not made in Finland versus the Vertical is made in Finland, and that's the reason for the price. And no, it's not. It's just simply Suunto recognizing that they can no longer price their products where they price them historically and thinking they're gonna make a sale. Like that's as simple as that. I asked that question like directly to them. Like there's no real meaningful difference from a manufacturing cost standpoint for them in the grand scheme of things. There are some advantages in one or the other, actually in both camps of those, depending on what you're looking at and doing. But that's a whole different video for a whole different time. But the point here is that they made a conscious decision to price it competitively in the marketplace and really undercut their competitors. And we would see that less than 24 hours later with the Polar Vantage V3 and how sharp Suunto's knife was when they went for blood there. Because it's, again, just a massive undercutting there. And then you look at this watch and go, oh yeah, I can compare that and see, do I want, if you look at something like the Garmin Forerunner 965, this is a $600 watch, so $150 more. There's obviously more features here. There's no question there's no more features there. No one would argue otherwise. But are those features worth the extra $150? And that's where people can make those decisions. Whereas if they had priced this at $600, then that's a really tough. You're back to the material bezel type stuff, which is
exactly.
It's a very tough game to win that. You'll win material and bezel, as we saw. COROS can do that, and for example, in the Vertex lineup, in very small percentages of the time, where you're like, oh, I want this particular bezel style, but most people shop features first, then material second. So this is where I think Suunto hit it out of the park with that one, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them, and not just on the hardware and the pricing, but on all the new software features they brought to Race and then brought back to Verticals.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And they recently just came out with a recent software update to kind of speed up the interface a little bit. Neither of us have actually tested that quite yet, so we're gonna test that. So look for that footage soon. But in terms of performance, it is going to be very much the same as the Vertical. Ridiculously good GPS performance. On the other end of the scale, heart rate performance, I would suggest you wear a heart rate strap with this watch. But yeah, sorry. And the reason I wanted to bring both of these out is that, I don't know, personally, kind of like the Galaxy Watch 6, I guess you could say this year, this was one of the winners for me this year in terms of aesthetics.
Yeah,
I thought both of these looked really good. I especially actually like the stainless steel all black one.
I actually did too. I thought it looked a lot nicer.
It's like, I mean, it looks so good. Yeah, that all black version. So anyways, that's kind of why I wanted to bring both of these out, because we had them. So,
yep.
And then last up, again, kind of flipping to the other end of the coin, was the Polar Vantage V3, the other comeback story of the year. So for, I guess you could say for different reasons, but Polar, it had been 3 years since they came out with the Vantage V2. So, I mean, it was like, we went like all throughout this year, like, is Polar alive? Like, I mean, they did have like one little sort of sports smartwatch.
Something heavy. Yeah. Ignite 3.
Something or other. Yeah. But just other than that, didn't really hear from Polar. And
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, from our standpoint, we were starting to get a little worried, and they came out with the Polar Vantage V3, which is great for them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good step. So the biggest ticket item on this was definitely the offline maps. So the first Polar watch to have offline maps on it, where you could see the maps below it, and their downloading process for it was super easy. Worldwide downloadable maps, etc. They also added a bunch of other kind of hardware tweaks. For example, a new optical heart rate sensor on the back, as well as multi-band GPS. So this is Polar's second watch with multi-band GPS, and the first one being the Ignite 3, and that was not awesome for multi-band GPS. It was not great accuracy, but this time around they largely did a solid job on GPS accuracy on this. They didn't have any real issues with it. Again, they admitted that one of the big learnings for them was antenna design on this. It's the same chipset as the Ignite 3, just a better antenna design. In particular, being aware of the materials of the bezel, they said, was more aware of the materials. Obviously, they're aware of it because they focus on that, but they knew they had a hit out of the park on this one. And I think this is a watch that it was priced at $600, or is priced at $600. So this is where it came out less than 24 hours, like I think 15 hours after the Suunto Race did, so almost identical time frames. And that's a tough thing to go back to back with Suunto, an AMOLED display, offline maps, very similar feature sets. Polar does have ECG in this, but not medically certified. So it just simply shows you a little graph that you then go to your doctor, but it can't detect an irregular rhythm or anything like that. So a little bit different there. No music or Wi-Fi support in this either. So not super ideal in terms of, music for either Polar or COROS or Suunto is a near impossibility, other than just doing, COROS can do, MP3 locally, and so could Suunto if they wanted to, but there's just no real market for that. People want offline Spotify and stuff like that, and that requires big contractual agreements, which just won't happen. The challenge I've had with this watch is that it was lacking some of the basic navigation features I would expect. So like when I went off course, the entire course had disappeared and you couldn't see your historical track anymore. In fact, you can't see your historical track at all, unless you've wrote a route, which is just mind-boggling to me. Also, I've had some pretty big crashes on some pretty big adventures that lost all my data, and that unfortunately has not been just me. A lot of people have seen that. Yeah.
I think the other story that I experienced was very irregular and quite shaky heart rate accuracy, at least for me. Like I don't know, I've said it before, is that, Polar has definitely produced some of the most accurate external heart rate sensors on the market, but it hasn't necessarily translated to their watches, unfortunately. And I'm still not seeing that of the Vantage V3. So hopefully it's a software thing.
They seem confident. I've been having emails with them back and forth. They were hoping to get a new firmware update to me yesterday. It got slid till Monday, so just a couple more days out. But they seem confident, especially in the optical heart rate sensor accuracy, because there was a time period where it was working better for me and then it got worse as production hit. So hopefully they'll be able to solve that. And the same goes for, I'm not worried about the navigation stuff. That's just features I can add.
That's all.
They need to play catch up and catch up fast. But I think the crashes, again, something I think they can track down and figure out, hopefully. But it'll be interesting to see where they go over here. Also, whether or not they'll maintain that pricing. I think that could be a tough price.
Yeah, I think that's really going to be the two issues for me are going to be the price, number one, especially when you talk about the Suunto Race. It's just it is a challenge. But the other thing for me is actually the interface. it really feels a bit dated to me at this point.
It does, yeah.
I mean, they've had the same interface basically since like the original Vantage, and I know it seems minor in the whole scheme of things, but it's something that you do interact with quite a bit, day to day. So maybe for somebody who's just getting a Polar watch, it's fine just because it's the first thing they're seeing. But for us who have reviewed these watches for years and years and years, it is feeling a little bit stale at this point. So I really would love to see an update on this one. But again, great to see Polar back in the game, though, especially. So, now realistically, we have, in terms of the offline map game, we have pretty much all the major players, back in the game. So we have Suunto, we have Polar, Garmin's always been there. COROS has been there for a while now, too, with offline maps. I mean, gosh, even, Amazfit with their, Cheetah and their other watches. I mean, offline maps are becoming more of a standard fare.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's the last watch.
Yeah.
I mean, technically there was the Garmin Descent, but we're not going to include that because I don't know if you can buy it at this point and get it or not.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and there was also the Garmin also came out with a Marq Carbon as well. So that was basically a carbonized version of their Marq Gen 2.
Yeah, so just a fancier case exterior. There was no actual new features there. So like we saw with the Marq last year, there was jet lag, right? Mm-hmm. But this time it was just
carbonized, and honestly, it's stunning. Like, it
looks beautiful.
It's absolutely beautiful. But do know that it is based on the Marq Gen 2, so it's not necessarily a Fenix 7 Pro into a Marq.
So no optical heart rate sensor from the back. No new optical heart rate sensor from the back. Obviously, there's optical heart rate.
Yeah, no flashlight, stuff like that too. Yeah. So, but yeah, stunning watch. So anyway, so that's basically all the major sports watch and smartwatch releases of 2023. So what are your kind of thoughts on this year?
As we said earlier, AMOLED for the win. I think also seeing companies, by and large anyways, focusing on major update cycles for software updates is huge. And I think we're seeing companies shift towards the releasing minor hardware. The Apples, Samsungs, and Googles is okay, right? Just have a minor hardware bump when it's necessary. And even to a somewhat similar degree with Garmin with the Pro series, right? In terms of, I would say they did more hardware in terms of having a flashlight and things like that, that the others did. But I think it would be really interesting to see next year, because theoretically next year would be a major year for almost all these companies, right? Like theoretically next year would be, if you assume a normal 14 to 16, 18 month cycle for the Fenix series, that would put sometime, maybe late summer, who knows when, a new Fenix and Epix in there, which would likely be a Fenix 8 and Epix, whatever they call it. And likely that would be the talk of, I don't know which one's lower or higher, but it'd be the bigger release cycle for Garmin. We would probably see a new Apple Watch SE come in next year. Like, that would make sense. There's lots of rumors around, an Apple Watch Ultra 3 having a new display technology. Like, I think as we look from this year to next year, this year was the minor year, and I think next year will be for a lot of companies here, a major year.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to kind of depend on the company, of course. Yeah. So, I think with Suunto and Polar, I think they laid a lot of good groundwork with brand new hardware this year. That I think that realistically for me, like, it'd be great to obviously see new hardware, but I think these watches could, just have new features being built upon them, which would again create that brand loyalty, which I think is going to be great. But yeah, I think next year will likely be big years for, I would say, Google Fitbit, Apple, and I would say hopefully Samsung as well. And you know what? Probably COROS too.
Yeah, I think so. I'm optimistic on Samsung. I think they've got to be getting it. Like, again, it's hard to churn a ship in some ways, right? There's a reality to when Apple releases the Apple Watch Ultra last year, Samsung has already laid the plans for their Samsung Watch 6s for that next summer, right? That ship has already been largely molded and they're figuring it out. You can't just like completely change everything in that time period, especially for a company that scale. And so it'd be interesting to see what comes out of that now for next year.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
But yeah, I would not expect any major releases from Suunto or Polar at the high end. I could see them do like a midpoint release, right? Like something at the half price of this, like the $300 level. So equivalent to their in the case of Polar, their Vantage M series, for example, the Suunto 5 series for that.
No, I could see with Suunto with the Race coming out at this price. I don't know. I could see them coming out with a mid-range offering that totally could shake things up.
Yeah, please Suunto, don't call a Suunto numbered thing. Don't call it like Suunto 5 plus Pro Peak Race.
Oh no, they've gone away from that.
They have.
Yeah, no, I have. Yeah, because I gave them honestly a lot of flack for that before, but
miserable. But I'm hoping they'll just pick a new name, Suunto. I don't know, not Race, whatever they call it.
Yeah.
Mini Race.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, I'm kind of hoping to see a lot more training performance feedback as well as health feedback across the board.
Yep.
Too, with a lot of these devices, because I think people are starting to pay attention to that a lot more. So yeah, COROS has an opportunity there. Actually, COROS did just add HRV tracking with a recent software update with their Pace 3 and quite a few other watches out there too. So
yep.
Again, I think we're seeing every single year, we're seeing that convergence a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, because, I think it's, we started smartwatch over here, started sportswatch over here,
yep.
And we're finally starting to see those like get closer.
Closer.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. Any parting words for this year?
No, I think we've got it. We've got it under an hour and 55 minutes.
And we have 48 seconds left on that timer right now.
We should stop the timer before we corrupt next.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So anyways, again, if you are interested in any of these watches in terms of like the details of any of these, I'm not going to have all of them linked down in the description below, but you can find them on, his website, his YouTube channel, or my YouTube channel as well. But until next year, 2024, I think it's going to be exciting.
Good stuff ahead.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thanks so much for watching.
Good. Have a good one.
All right. See ya. No taller. And 3, 2, 1. Every year. Yep. But that's terrible, actually.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. I'm sure over again.
They do.
I was ready to get a drink. I wasn't ready.
Ready?
There.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay, so stop recording.
Yeah. Will you tell me you're still red? Oh, Jesus.
Oh, Jesus.
Thumbnail.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to thumbnail.
Is that?
Okay, we'll be good.
All right, that'll be good.